Welcome back to the Convo Couch, ladies and gentlemen. Pasta Jardula here with a special edition, a special show today. Not only did we go out there and get you guys some good people who understand what's going on with the rent and moratorium situation, if you want to even call it a moratorium situation, I got these awesome duo of twins with us over here, Stefano, not twins, brother and sister, excuse me, Stefano and Natalie Medina, sorry about saying that, are more than just brothers and sisters. They're actually out there fighting for what I call rental justice. So welcome to the show, guys. How you doing today?
Thank you. Doing
Pretty good. Yeah, it's the days are long and they're packed with landlords trying to evict tenants, but we managed to stay happy in the fight and helping as many people as we can.
How did you guys get involved with this right now? Did you want to become lawyers and then, let's get into eviction law? Or was this something that was kind of set in stone a while ago and kind of compelled you to get into this field?
Well, I think that Stefano and I and our family, like our older brother is an organizer, and he had a strong commitment to doing work for the Latinx community in particular. And we learned his example and started getting involved just in the community and doing work. And one of the problems that we just started to see, like just growing and growing was like this housing problem. People in our family have been evicted in the past. And it is like kind of, it is really personal. And we love the city of Los Angeles. And the city of Los Angeles that I love is a city that includes a lot of different communities, including the community that I grew up with. And I just hate to see that community shrink and disappear and move away and get priced out of the city or become homeless in the city. And I would say a lot of the work I do is for love for this city and for the communities that live here.
But it didn't happen on purpose. I don't think either one of us. Well, when Natalie started law school, 4 or 5 years ago now, I don't think that she knew from day one that she was going to end up doing this type of work.
No, I knew like 3 months later.
Not too much time wasted, 90 days.
Yeah.
I was an organizer before law school, working in the community around issues like this. And like Natalie just said, I mean, the housing crisis is, for us at least, the defining civil rights issue of our time. It's the defining racial justice issue of our time. Housing is where our community is, fighting for its right to exist. Community is not just one person or two people. It's not even really just a family. You don't even really know everyone in your community. So it's not always easy to see what the threat is to your community. But if you're on the ground and if you're meeting your neighbors and you see what's happening to the neighborhoods that you care about, it becomes, at least it was clear to us a long time ago that housing was where the fight was. So that's where we are.
Yeah.
It's funny too as well, because I know you mentioned racial justice and whatnot, but this is a serious problem right now where it's just going to be an American issue where a lot of American people across the country, black, white, brown, yellow, Latino, the whole 9 yards, are facing an eviction. They were told to stay at home, don't go to work. A lot of small businesses have closed. And right now, the tsunami of problems are coming down on us right now. And a lot of people are going to be homeless. So I just want to thank you guys again. Thank you for your story about how you got here and whatnot, doing organizing. I think it's amazing. That's how we started the show. As activists out on the street organizing, with Bernie Sanders in 2016, we've developed and kind of gone a certain way. But when it comes to housing, it's no joke. We take it serious and we want to know our rights and know where people can get help. Because I think I was watching a piece on you guys when you had said something like, and maybe you can just correct me if I'm wrong or give me the actual statistics on how many people who don't have representation when it comes to an eviction situation lose the case, and how many people actually win their case when they have representation when it comes to eviction.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that there are different studies out there, and so there are different numbers and ranges. I think on the conservative side, 77% of tenants lose their cases without an attorney. And on, you look at maybe everything, it's something like 98% of tenants lose their cases when they're alone in court. Versus when, at least our numbers at the Eviction Defense Network where we work, we have like a success rate of like 98%. And, we don't cherry pick. So an attorney just makes such a huge difference because it's really complicated, these laws.
What do people do if they can't afford an attorney? I know a lot of people out there are going, no way, I can't even afford how to put food on the table. How am I going to afford an attorney? What can they do to get some help? Because the most vulnerable right now cannot afford an attorney.
I mean, you want to take this?
Well, I mean, the good news is that in response to the eviction tsunami and the situation that the COVID-19 pandemic has put all types of tenants in, a lot of them for the first time in their lives, people who never anticipated ever finding themselves in this situation. Because of that, in Los Angeles and in other places, here in LA, the county has funded a program called Stay Housed LA. And through that program, there's a website, stayhousedla.org.
Mm-hmm.
stayhousedla.org. So the good news is that if you're a tenant facing an eviction right now in Los Angeles, if you go to that website, answer some simple questions, you'll get a referral to a legal service provider that should be able to offer you legal representation for free.
Yeah, and for a few people who don't qualify, it does provide sliding scale attorneys, so you can still get an attorney you can afford. So it really does level the playing field, and all of this sort of comes from a history of many years of trying to fight for something called right to counsel. The public defender movement, everyone knows that there are public defenders and that, you have a right to an attorney if you can't afford one. So what we're trying to do is create that for evictions, right? We want every single person who's facing eviction to have an attorney because it's a game changer, right? And the Stay Housed it came out of the groups that were fighting for the statutory right to counsel. We were getting a pilot program ready to be able to start doing that type of work in the city of Los Angeles, but the pandemic put that into overdrive and it became a county program, and we hope it's here to stay.
So that's the good news.
The bad news?
Well, we'll get to the bad news. The not so great news is that, this program is as great as it is, it's not, we still don't have the resources necessary to really respond adequately to the problem. If all of the people who really needed legal representation right now did exactly what we said and went to stayhousedla.org and requested an attorney, there aren't enough tenant attorneys to meet this demand. 2-3 years ago, progressive law students, radical law students, none of them were going into housing justice work. The leftist law students who really wanted to make an impact were going into criminal justice work, immigration justice work, a lot of these established fields of social justice work. And so now a lot of people that we went to law school with who never expected to find themselves doing the kind of work we are, the kind of work that we do, now they're here and they're new attorneys and they're being thrown into this pandemic, into this eviction tsunami. And there hasn't really been as much time as we really would have liked to have had to build a pipeline of trained tenant attorneys. So that's the not so great news. And the bad news is how many people are never going to find out about this program? How many people could find out about it but don't have a laptop, do not have the familiarity with the internet, technology, filling out forms online.
Yeah, older folks.
If you do not know how to electronically sign a legal document, then that alone is a huge barrier to getting to really accessing this program. And I barely know how to e-sign documents. That's something I had to learn recently.
And I think also you hit on a point earlier where you were saying that people never, what do people do when they find themselves in this problem? Like, do people go find an attorney? A lot of people just leave. A lot of people get a 3-day notice to pay rent or quit, and they go, I have no money, I guess I'm gonna go. And where they go, that's their friend's place, a family member, if they're lucky and they have that support system, that community. But when you're part of a community that's already been shrunk and already disappearing, that list gets smaller and smaller. So where do people go? They live in their cars. A lot of people don't have cars. Where do they go if they don't have a car? They live on the street. Okay, and so that is, the impact, and those are numbers that we won't know for a while.
Yeah. And I guess one of the last pieces of bad news is that because landlords have fought to make evicting low-income tenants one of the easiest and quickest things that you can do in California, evictions are summary proceedings. And so from the moment that you become aware that you are being evicted, you have 5 days. Not 5 days to get a lawyer, not 5 days to get over the trauma of the eviction, not 5 days to read the 30, 40, 50-page document that, is in legalese. You have 5 days to do everything, 5 days to appear in court and to answer the eviction. And for almost everyone, especially given the mental health issues that so many people have been struggling with, by the time you finally manage to find yourself on stayhousela.org talking to an attorney, those deadlines have passed, and it becomes more difficult to help a tenant in that situation. And that's most tenants that come to us seeking help. Those deadlines have passed.
Wow, that's a buzzkill before we even get started, Stefano. But it is the truth, and I'm glad we're getting it out there with now. I remember during the primaries, there was this kind of like pizza service, right, where they were telling people to stay in line, and they would send pizza out to you for free. And a couple people who had a few bucks would put like a couple hundred into it, 200 into it, 300 to it. Is there any way where people who have a few dollars or who are not in threat of being evicted could help out this particular website and organization you got going that can help you train the lawyers, get more lawyers going and whatnot? In other words, is there a pipeline to get a few bucks in there?
I mean, we accept donations, and if you go to our website, there is a way to donate to help us because we do a lot of work for free. We do free counsel and advice. So tenants that are facing problems, they can reach out to us, and we provide that service for free.
What's the website again?
It's edn.la. And so it's towards the bottom of our page to make donations. If people want to do that, it would definitely help us. But I'm sure there are also tons of pages of tenants who are on GoFundMe or Kickstarter type GoFundMe type pages asking for money, trying to fundraise in order to be able to pay for their rent or a new place.
I mean, by far the three most impactful things. This is a systemic issue, and it's going to clearly require a systemic solution. Part of the upshot of all the bad news I shared is that the systemic solutions that our government has offered us so far are just plainly inadequate, and they always have been. And so that's where the real solution is going to come. But what can an individual do to do their part to respond to this crisis? Like Natalie said, there are volunteer opportunities with the legal service organizations that offer this support to tenants. And so you could volunteer. But the law has a limited solution. Some of the most impactful things, some of the most helpful things that we've seen non-lawyers do to assist in this situation is join the Los Angeles Tenants Union, join the Alliance of Californians for Community Empowerment, join a local tenant association, join a tenant organization. Because what you are asked to do once you're a member of these organizations is stand up to landlords, let them know that their behavior is unacceptable. Go to a lockout, tell the sheriff's department, tell the sheriff's deputies that what they're doing is wrong and that we're going to tell the world. And I guess the last thing that an individual can do is, next time you're looking for an apartment, you're seeing an apartment and it's being shown to you and it's beautiful and it's an up and coming neighborhood and you can see the next 5-10 years of your life happening in this beautiful apartment. Ask the person showing you the apartment, what happened to the person who lived there before you? Were they evicted? I think individuals more and more are going to have to shoulder the responsibility of being intentional about their actions, about where they choose to live. You move somewhere to pay a little bit less, to pay what you can afford maybe. And so you're making the right decision for you. But often the right decision for you is directly related to the displacement that we're seeing in our communities.
Yeah, I would add one
Go ahead.
Which is, also we need to change these laws, and the people in the legislature, they don't believe that this is a serious problem, and they don't believe it. It's obvious to me that they don't believe it because they haven't done anything, and it's so hard to get laws passed that are good for tenants. You touched on a point that this pandemic is making eviction and housing instability a reality for for communities and groups of people that never thought they would face that problem. And that's there's an opportunity there for those people, and for anyone who knows anyone going through a hard time, to call your local representative and demand them to change the laws, demand them to cancel the rent. We need to ask for these things because they think, oh, it's not that big of a problem. Because you know what people are doing? People are putting their rent on their credit cards. And this is going to be a problem that's going to last for, decades for all we know, the financial impact. And it's because of this. It's because of the rent.
Yeah. Well, this would be a perfect time for me to talk about, when you talk about calling your representative, we also got to fix our election system, because all these people getting in seem to be loyal to the real estate lobby and not loyal to the tenant out there. And it's really screwing them. But I don't want to get off topic. That's something I always talk about all the time. I'm an election integrity activist, and I've been fighting in California with these elections. They're just ridiculous. And there's a lot of people like Angelica Duenas and Raji Rob and Shahid Buttar who I want them to get a fair shot, because I know they'll look out for the little guy there. You know what I'm saying? But anyways, let's get go into what's going on right now, because you guys have laid out a lot of stuff and there's a lot of things to talk about. And I really just want to put out the fact. Piggyback on the fact, Stefano, that you said we are bigger in numbers. And when you join these unions and people together and we stand together in solidarity, that's when we make real change. So people out there watching, please consider joining your local tenants unit right away. So let's do a quick rundown of where we stand today. AB 3088 is what we're sitting on right now, right? So for people out there who haven't paid rent since, like, let's say March of 2020, it went till September, and then I believe that AB 3088 came out, and that said that after 5 months, being the end of January, which is right now, the tenant would then have to pay 25% of those 5 months to avoid eviction court, and therefore the rest of the money would have to go into some type of conditional payment or whatnot. We were told to hold on and wait and see what the legislation can come up with as far as rent forgiveness for all that past rent due, or maybe they would stretch it out to pay it off in 20 years. Where are we today as of the end of January 2021, where a lot of people are saying, should we pay that 25%? Should we look for a new place because we don't want our debt to continue to get bigger? Where are we at right now?
Okay, so so AB 38 is a really complicated law. Okay, all of the laws that we have right now to help tenants are really complicated and confusing, and honestly badly written, and that's why they're so confusing. So I'm gonna break this AB 3088 down as simply as possible. No. What it does in particular is it divides the months that we've been living with the pandemic, March to January, into two periods. The first period is March through the end of August. Okay, that period, if you send a declaration to the landlord that says that you had a COVID-19, financial impact, and the form is out there, it's easy to get a hold of.
Just Google AB 3088 declaration. It's everywhere.
Yeah, and you sign it, and you send it to the landlord. That means that the landlord cannot evict you for not having been able to pay that rent. Okay, for the rent between March through August.
Yeah.
Then it says there's rent. What about the months that are coming, right? So September, October, November, December, January. For those months, it said if a tenant sends a declaration to the landlord that they have a COVID-19 financial reason for not being able to pay the rent, you do that each month, or you can do it now for all the months that have passed, and you pay 25% of the rent. So 25% of September, 25% of October, November, so on. But you don't have to pay it each month. You could pay it all before January 30th, or before the end of the month, or before February 1st. Then it takes you out of eviction proceedings. The landlord can evict you for not paying the rent. What AB 38 doesn't do is it does not cancel the rent. That rent debt, it still exists. And starting on March 1st, landlords can go into small claims court in order to collect that rent against you.
What does that leave us for February? Because you said that's the end of January. Did they extend it to the end of February?
Not yet.
As things currently stand.
Okay, but they can't start the eviction process until March 1st, is what you're saying?
No, they can start the eviction process now.
Okay.
The eviction process it has not been stopped. What happens is that under AB 3088, they can't enter judgment against you until February 1st. So if you already are in eviction proceedings, the landlord already sued you, you haven't lost your case yet. You're not allowed to lose your case yet. But starting on February 1st, you can lose your case. And on February 1st, you have to be able to pay the rent in full.
100%.
100%. And if you don't, you can be evicted for non-payment of rent in February. Immediately. But March 1st is small claims. That's when they can start going after the rent that you didn't pay from March through August and the 75% from September to January.
So let's tell this. Let's put this in real life. So there's this person out there. Maybe it's you. Maybe it's one of your listeners who hasn't been able to pay their rent since March. They've been unemployed. Whatever income, whatever unemployment benefits, whatever part-time work they managed to find has gone to feeding themselves and taking care of themselves, whatever, unexpected, a lot of people are facing unexpected medical expenses. Okay, and then at some point last year, you're one of the lucky people who heard about AB 3088 on the news, so you sent your declaration in, covering the first period, covering the second period, and somehow, one way or another, you managed to pay 25% of the rent that was owed between September and January 31st by the end of this month. Okay, great. So what situation are you in starting February 1st? You're not going to get evicted for all of that rent in the past if you went to court and asserted this defense that you paid 25% of your rent. So if you didn't do that, if you paid 25% of the rent, but your landlord sued you anyways, and maybe you didn't get the summons, or maybe you got it and you thought this can't be real.
There's an eviction moratorium.
So because you didn't show up in court, it doesn't matter that you pay 25% of your rent. You're still going to lose. You're still going to get evicted. There's still going to be a judgment entered against you. Let's say you went to court and you said, hey, listen, here, I got this receipt. I paid 25% of my rent. Okay, great. As things currently stand, if you don't pay 100% of your rent by, let's say your rent is due February 1st, you don't pay it by February 3rd. The landlord sends a notice saying, hey, you got 3 days to pay this rent or you're getting evicted. You don't pay your 100% of February rent by February 6th. On February 7th, the landlord's going to go into court and he's going to start eviction proceedings. And you can go to court if you want to, and you can say that you've been financially impacted by COVID-19 if you want to. As things currently stand, as of February 1st, that won't be a defense.
Yeah, unless you live in a city or county that has an additional protection, although AB 3088 has taken the teeth out of some local protections.
What about what if I do this? What if I pay the 25%, right? And I give a 30-day notice on February 1st and say I'll be vacating the place by the end of February. Can they still evict me for not paying February's rent if I give a 30-day notice and say I'm bouncing?
They can still file the eviction against you. But because eviction court, as Stefano mentioned earlier, summary proceedings, that means they get special priority. Like in regular cases, if you want to file, it takes like 2 years to get in court. But with an eviction, it takes 20 days to get in court. And so
even at this time, Natalie?
Yeah, even now.
You're getting people in the court. There's not a backlog of all these landlords that's going to come and they're going to say, hey, this is going to be knocked back.
There's a backlog for sure, but there's a backlog for sure if you have a lawyer and you demand a jury trial. But they still have to get their first date in court, and then the court assign. It happens differently in different courts, but basically, yeah, that's still true right now today, despite all the stuff. Which is why we so strongly tell people there is no eviction moratorium. It's misleading, and honestly, it's scary that
Didn't Biden sign something yesterday? I saw Ilhan Omar said Biden extended the moratorium.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing with the moratorium, and here's the thing with the Los Angeles emergency COVID-19 tenant protections, whatever tenant protections might exist in whatever city your listeners are living in. It applies to AB 3088. We've sort of said this, before. Every single tenant protection that exists, every single tenant protection that your listeners could possibly heard of is it's something we call an affirmative defense. That's all it is. That means that it's only matters and it's only meaningful. It will only protect you if you show up in court to respond to an eviction and you assert one of these defenses.
And you prove it.
You
have to prove it too. It's not even an assumption that, that I've been affected by COVID-19. You're not even given the benefit of the doubt.
So in reality, all of these eviction protections are extremely weak, even the strongest ones. We could pass the strongest eviction defense protection. I could write the bill of my dreams. If it's an affirmative defense, as they all are, it's only going to help anybody if they have a lawyer. This is a fantasy that the wealthy people who write our laws live in. They think that there are an army of people like Natalie and me out here waiting for the opportunity to go into court to defend tenants, when in reality, we have put the entire burden of defending tenants facing eviction during this pandemic on the myth that there are the legal resources out there to defend everybody. And the truth is that there isn't.
Yeah, I was in court just the other day and I heard the judge say that to an unrepresented tenant. There are plenty of attorneys out there that are doing this work, and I'm listening to this and I'm going, no, there aren't.
But wait a second, guys. Stefano and Natalie with an H. We have California here, lockdown crazy laws, whether you believe in the whole what we should do, what we shouldn't do. And I've always said from the get-go is that no matter what, we have to provide a financial and housing solution, which we have not. But you got Gavin Newsom, and even the other day when I went to go pay a bill in the local Pasadena courthouse for my power, they were closed down due to COVID restrictions. So we're on mass shutdowns over here. The hospitality business has been shot. How can they just throw people on the streets right now with all this going on?
That's what I ask myself every day too. I tenants are in this situation, and I always think that it's not a tenant's fault when the housing crisis has affected them and you can't make the rent because the rent's too damn high. But there are so many tenants today who, through no fault of their own, no matter how you cut it, cannot afford to pay the rent, and they're listening to their government when they stay home, and their government has done nothing to provide for them in this situation.
I mean, the real answer to your question, and it's something you said at the beginning, is that the people who are writing these laws are not the people who are being impacted by them. Our elected officials are just extremely out of touch. They think that they will pass these laws and they'll have an impact because they've never been evicted. They've never been sued. They don't know what the summons and complaint looks like. They don't know how dense it is. A lot of them don't know that tenants will only have 5 days to respond to the eviction. A lot of them don't know that these protections are basically meaningless without legal representation. When we spoke to the LA County Sheriff, Villanueva, last month, to basically ask him the question you just asked us. Sheriff Villanueva, why are you throwing people out into the street in the middle of the most dangerous surge that we've had yet, in the middle of stay-at-home orders? Why are you doing this? And what he said to us, and your listeners can choose to believe this if you want, he told us that he was under the impression that the only evictions that the sheriff's department was getting from the court had to do with cases where a tenant had been convicted of domestic violence, where some sort of criminal activity had happened. He believed that the only evictions that he was executing were this small subset of evictions that the common person would believe maybe these should still be happening. That couldn't be the furthest from the truth.
What did Sheriff Al say when you told him that couldn't be anything further from the truth?
Well, he took a break from the phone call he was having with us, confirmed with his staff that what we were saying was true. And then he told us, okay, well, in that case, this is just simply wrong. And we're going to stop doing this until we can get to the bottom of it. And so one of the nice things that happened in 2020 was that nobody was evicted by the Sheriff's Department in Los Angeles County during Christmas and New Year. But while we were waiting for the follow-up call, while we were waiting to make this temporary pause an actual common sense pandemic policy, the Los Angeles Superior Court, the judges who rule the court system in Los Angeles, the judges who are supposed to be neutral, the judges who are supposed to be impartial, those judges, one of them, the presiding judge last year, a judge named Kevin Brazil, was advocating to Villanueva, saying that actually these lockouts had to go forward. And when we found out that the judges that we are in front of every day, the judges that are ruling sometimes for, sometimes against our clients, that their leaders were the ones pushing hard to get Villanueva to resume these lockouts, we were shocked.
Yeah, and we've even heard reports that lots of the judges, the trial judges, don't want these trials to move forward. But
They're afraid.
But their superiors are forcing them to keep evictions down the line. Lots of cases have stopped, but cases like eviction cases and traffic cases and certain types of criminal cases haven't stopped. And I cannot think of why that's happening, except that I think last year 44% of the cases that went through the LA the Superior Court system were eviction cases, and those
44%.
filing fees are what keep the courts running, because the courts have been seriously underfunded and at the brink of just funding issues since the 90s. So I don't know. I mean, for me, I think that maybe we need to follow the money, and that's where the answer is. It's usually there.
2018, I only voted for one person. That's Sheriff Alex Villanueva, because I knocked on doors with him and I was really just impressed by what he had to say and the way he was facing the people and the questions that were given to him, the way he answered, and also the fact he was running against this guy McDonald, who I thought was
voted for him too. I voted for Villanueva because he told the community that he was going to stop cooperating with immigration enforcement.
He did. And a lot of people don't understand that the reason why the Obama-Biden administration, literally deported twice as many immigrants as Donald Trump was a lot to do with what Sheriff Villanueva did, and that was not cooperate with ICE. He threw them out of the jail systems, but he's gotten so much crap for the way he was handling these protests, and it was just like one of those situations. It's like he's taking over a sheriff's department that's been run by Republicans for so long, and I'm not one to go the party line Republican Democrat, but I mean the way they handled this, I don't think they handled it in the best way. And he's gotten so much pressure. But from what you just told me, from your conversations with him and what he did, it kind of gives me hope that Sheriff Alex Villanueva is at least somewhat working with the people. And also, let's point out, when you talk about the superiors, when I tell people back east, when I was just back east, and they're like, well, what lobbyist is the strongest in California? I tell them it's the real estate lobbyist. They have Gavin Newsom, Pelosi, all under their thumbs. So when you said these judges' superiors are telling them to do this, who are those superiors? Is it part of the lobbyists and the rich people who write the laws?
I'm sure the landlord lobby is heavily coming down on the court system for stopping evictions.
And a lot of judges are landlords.
Yeah.
And this decision, this policy, which we've only heard rumors about, rumors that have been substantiated week after week, is that this decision came all the way from the Chief Justice of the California Supreme Court, who is ultimately the superior of the superiors. Apparently, local presiding judges across California counties were asking for the discretion to be able to postpone eviction proceedings. And from what we've heard, it was the Chief Justice that put the hammer down.
What's that son of a beeswax name so we can expose that person?
Her name is, I'm gonna mess it up.
Stefano's looking it up right now. Let's expose this person right now. The landlord herself, the slumlord of California, where it's just awful, where we have close to 65,000 homeless people in Los Angeles, 40,000 homeless in Orange County, close to 70,000 in San Francisco. We have almost 25% of the homeless people across this country live right here in this state. And I want that person's name so we can expose that person.
I'll give you three names. One, we've already heard, LA County Sheriff Alex Villanueva. Another name is the current presiding judge of the Los Angeles Superior Court, the Honorable Eric Taylor. And then the Chief Justice of the California Supreme Court, her name is Tani Cantil-Sakuye. And, we have been asking for these people to pick up the phone for months. We have sent letter after letter. We have been waiting. So these people, if they see this interview and disagree with the version of events that we're seeing on the ground, they can give us a call any day. We've been waiting for them to come to the table to find a real solution to this crisis.
So Villanueva stopped playing ball then. He's back into the evictions thing. All right, Chef Alex, that I knocked on doors with you. And, he's not bad about as far as facing the fire and taking questions. We've actually had him with a group here, and we live streamed him to talk about the protests going on. So I think we should give Alex Villanueva a call and tell him to stop the evictions. He's had the guts to do stuff before. He can have the guts to do it now in the middle of a pandemic.
All right. In March, he did it in December. There's no reason why
he can't do it now. That's right. That's right. All right. So that's AB 3088. And as things go right now, end of January, pay the 25%. You supposedly can avoid evictions court if you start paying the rent again. I asked if you give a notice and just leave right now because you want to cut your losses. Because I believe when it comes to AB 3088, they also haven't decided how you're going to pay the past due rent. Have they made any decisions on that with AB 3088?
Sort of. I mean, the solution is what I mentioned before, which is small claims court. So the landlord goes to small claims court, he gets a judgment against you, and then they can start garnishing your wages. And so it's going to be, that can be potentially really, really awful for tenants, for everyone, because we're just going to see a lot of colossal debt. Although it is supposed to be masked so that no one knows what that debt is for. Like, I don't know. That part's a little convoluted.
But they can take you to small claims court and start garnishing your wages. That's all right. So let's talk about AB 50. Sorry, Stefano.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, let's talk about AB 15 right now, because AB 15, Assembly Bill 15, is in the woodworks. First of all, who sponsored and co-sponsored it, so we can at least give some little credit to some people who are trying to act like they're help. Do you know who sponsored and co-sponsored?
The author of the bill, the champion of the bill, the legislator that we've been working with the closest is Assembly Member David Chu of San Francisco.
Always David Chu.
Yeah.
Of course, there are other legislators in Sacramento who are co-sponsoring this, who are fighting for this. Maria Elena Durazo here from Los Angeles has been...
Not Rendon, though. Not Anthony Rendon. No, right?
No,
not the speaker.
No.
Not Eric Hold'em, who's supposed to be a progressive right over here in Pasadena. No, not Eric Hold'em. Not Anthony Portantino from the Senate even talking about this bill. So now we know we have to expose these people who are not standing by these tenants who could get thrown in the streets, and the people that we should look to say, hey, great job. What is AB 15 all about? When can it, first of all, where is it at in the stages of as far as becoming law? Because we're at the end of January right now. And even before AB 15, is there any talk about extending AB 3088 to the end of February?
So there are two bills, basically. There are two bills. When AB 3088 was passed in September, and it only gave tenants a couple of months of certainty with all the weaknesses of that bill, at least people knew. In December, people anticipating this deadline expiring, David Chu introduced two bills. And AB 15, because of the emergency, because of the eviction cliff that tenants in California are facing, AB 15 was never meant to be anything more than an extension of AB 3088 with maybe some of common sense fixes, closing some loopholes that Natalie mentioned, maybe making it a little bit less confusing, maybe making it a little bit less easy for landlords to abuse that process. But AB 15 was never meant to be anything other than a straight extension of AB 3088 so that tenants didn't face a mass eviction in February while the legislator was trying to handle the very tricky question of what to do with all of this COVID rental debt. The other bill that David Chu introduced at the same time, AB 16, that is supposed to be the legislative vehicle for really answering these big picture questions about what to do with COVID debt. So with AB 15, for the past month, for the past few weeks, as much as tenant advocates have been in Sacramento pushing for this bill to be passed, no one really expected AB 15 to be much of a fight. Nobody really, because even the landlord lobby knew that it was going to be completely unacceptable for all of the AB 3088's meager protections to expire in February. And so as of most of this month, those negotiations were on track to be successful. Most of the people that we hear from in Sacramento, nobody was too worried about AB 15 getting extended. Everybody was preparing for a much more thoughtful and longer conversation around AB 16 to take on these big picture questions. But then, just like what happened in August and September around AB 3088, when tenant advocates like my sister, who was doing a lot of lobbying, were negotiating with the landlord lobby around a package, in a very similar process, at the last minute, at the 11th hour, the governor, Gavin Newsom, realized one day that, hey, this eviction crisis might be part of something he needs to pay attention to. So in the past week or so, we've seen the governor weigh into this issue and completely muddy it up.
Yeah. I just want to add, so we spent the entire summer really lobbying for a different law than AB 3088, lobbying, I think it was 1356. And that was the solution that tenant advocates were looking for, and they made lots of concessions. But at the 11th hour, Governor Newsom got the ear, the developers and the landlord lobby got his ear, and they came up with AB 3088 as a compromise, but they pushed tenant advocates completely out of that conversation. That was the conversation between the governor and these lobbies, and that's it. And that's what's happening again.
And the exact same thing is happening right now. Right now, just like what happened in last summer, tenant advocates who have been negotiating and fighting for AB 15 are being completely shut out of the conversation. The deadline for a legislative extension to AB 38 is Monday. Monday is the last opportunity for a bill to be introduced to the legislature and be passed in time to extend the protections. And guess when? Gavin Newsom, again, has decided to get involved. So over the past few days, we've seen tenant advocates completely shut out of this conversation. And we are just waiting on pins and needles to see what Governor Newsom and his developer friends have for Californians on Monday.
As if the majority of this state wasn't full of renters.
Yeah, no doubt. And I just want to point out, 11th hour, Gavin Newsom. It is people already saying, oh, you got to vote for a Democrat over a Republican. Like, nope. A lot of them are bought and they're on the same team. It's one big aisle. They deal with the landlords and the developers, and they shut the renters out. And I think we should give Gavin Newsom hell. There should be protests right out in front of his house, like there were protests right out in front of Garcetti's house. How does Garcetti play into this whole thing? I saw a lot of people from the city council of LA. They used to throw protests out in front of Garcetti's house. How does he play into any of this at all? The mayor of LA?
Well, the city council passed pretty strong tenant protections back in March, tenant protections that made more sense than what came out of the legislature months later. Those protections are still in effect. So if you live in the city of Los Angeles, then you still benefit from those protections after January. But in terms of the mayor, we all know that Garcetti has been AWOL for the past few years, basically since the day he got sworn in as mayor. And so he really wasn't a meaningful player around the local protections in Los Angeles. Now, obviously, since he has come to accept that maybe he's not going to be offered a cabinet position in the Biden administration, we've seen him and his staff reorient themselves to their constituents. And so maybe the mayor can get involved and be a strong voice on this issue. But as of now, we don't talk to the mayor's office when we're worried about the bills that are being drafted.
And let me just say that also AB 3088 sort of cuts the feet under local laws. Local laws are free to continue to pass them as long as they don't do anything to the rent debt. If a new law that comes out, like for instance, the County of Los Angeles laws, a lot of those are probably preempted by AB 3088 because they were passed month by month. And any law that was passed after August of 2020 is going to be almost completely preempted as to what it does to rent debt. So, they really, there's not that much power there, although there's a lot we can do outside of rent debt, because a lot of people are being evicted under pretextual, like they know that the landlord knows he can't evict you for non-payment of rent for March. But he can think of a bunch of other reasons that he can make up to evict you.
And it really doesn't matter at all. A landlord could come up with anything. They could evict you because you burned down the building. And if you don't show up in court to say, actually, no, the building is standing and I was in Maui, at the time where this alleged arson took place. If you don't show up in court, you're going to receive a default judgment. So I've talked enough about why the legal representation and these types of tenant protections are insufficient to really help most people. So what is a policy? What are tenant advocates demanding? What do we hope AB 16 becomes? The solution that we've been demanding for the greater part of a year now is rent forgiveness.
Yes. I was about to say, let me just get this straight. So AB 15 is an extension of pretty much of AB 3088. However, it's not in law yet. Are they set to vote on this, the assembly? And does it have to go through the state Senate and then Gavin Newsom? Are they going to fast track it? What's the situation like now when it comes to AB 15?
What we're hearing is that Gavin Newsom's proposed deal that, again, it could be anything and we'll only know for sure on Monday. But what we're hearing is that Gavin Newsom wants to strike some sort of grand bargain and introduce a fix that both extends AB 3088 protections, but also definitively decides what's going to happen with COVID debt. So so if Gavin Newsom gets his way, AB 15 and AB 16 are over, and whatever deal he hatched with the real estate lobby is going to answer all questions.
And you're expecting that Monday, you said?
Monday is the deadline for when any sort of for when legislation has to be introduced in order for it to be passed in time.
And let me just say, in the summer, they cut it down to the wire. They also passed, and they also came up with that deal the weekend before the deadline. So what we expect the governor and what we expect the other side of the aisle here to really introduce is rental assistance, which is a program that a lot of local governments have already passed. The city of Los Angeles had their emergency rental assistance program over the summer, where basically if you are a tenant who owes a lot of rent because of COVID-19, you can apply for this program, and it's basically a lottery. And if you're lucky and you win, then the government is going to pay 100% of the rent that you owed to the landlord, and in exchange, the landlord, clearly can't evict you for non-payment of rent, and it's optional. A landlord can choose to reject it. And we see that all this whole pandemic, we've seen landlords rejecting.
That's one of the biggest weaknesses of these rental assistance programs, is that they're not mandatory. And so a landlord who has a low income, tenant, maybe a person of color in a gentrifying community who's lived in an apartment for 10, 15, 20 years,
that's rent control,
pays $1,000 a month for a 1-bedroom, whereas the new tenants in the building are paying 2-3 times that. A landlord would love to just displace and evict that tenant. And if the only solution to the rental debt is this optional assistance program, then each and every time the landlord's going to choose to evict that tenant.
I see what you're saying. So the assistance really isn't even a surefire fix, because the landlord's going to be like, no, I'm not doing that. Get rid of him anyway so I can get that rent back up. But isn't there any fear that since it's post-COVID or close to or middle of COVID, that post-COVID will not have the same type of renters market in LA, and they probably might want to just get that money and keep somebody there? Is there any of that going on?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for landlords that have tenants that are in rent controlled below market units, there's no reason why the landlord would want to accept that money. But for landlords who have like middle income tenants, then there is an incentive for them to stay and to accept that rent subsidy. And at that point, it's not a subsidy for tenants. It's a subsidy for landlords. We're paying their mortgages, and the taxpayers are doing that in order for those landlords to continue to making a profit out of something that is a human right. Housing is a human right, in my opinion.
And unfortunately, because rental assistance programs are covering 100% of the landlord's mortgage, or even more, 100% of the rent, 100% of the rent. Even if they wanted to make it mandatory, even if they said to landlords, hey, listen, you have to take this money and you can't evict this tenant, because these programs are funding 100% of the lucky few's rental debt, there isn't enough money in the country to cover all of the unpaid rent that has happened over the past year. Now, on the other hand, the solution that tenant advocates are pushing for is rental forgiveness. This rental debt, it disappeared. It doesn't exist anymore. And so that solves the problem that we've been talking about this entire hour. If there's no rental debt, then a landlord can't go into court and say that they owe you money. Even a neutral judge is going to have to admit that this is clearly an unfounded eviction.
Plus you have the situation of landlords who, so the rental debt, like right now, the tenants are bearing the burden of the economic impacts of this global pandemic. If we cancel the rent, then there are lots of intents and programs in order to help smaller landlords, face that burden. And really, you can also, cancel mortgages as well, okay, and just put them to the end of the line.
Exactly, you put them on the back end, right?
And the next person in line are the banks. And our government has a way of dealing with that. It's called a bailout. They did it before when Wall Street mismanaged the money of everybody in this country. Well, not everyone, of many people in this country. And that is something, that is a solution. Pass the buck. There is somebody who should be bearing the burden, and it's not tenants.
Yeah.
Or homeowners.
It's like 2008 all over again. Instead of Obama bailed out the banks, he could have bailed out the people, whatnot. And he threw so many people on the streets and got evicted from their houses.
That's
Just
right.
a terrible situation. So I know we ain't got much time left. So let's kind of sum up what's going on. By the way, does AB 16, does it have debt forgiveness, rent forgiveness, wipe out that debt inside the bill? Did Chu include that or no?
We've been so focused on AB 15 for the past month and a half that we've been only beginning to have the conversations around AB 16. But without a doubt, what the Assembly Member Chu and what tenant advocates were going to push for in AB 16 was rental forgiveness, and then all of the tens of billions of dollars that are coming from the federal government and that the state is expected to contribute to this crisis will go into a fund. And landlords would apply to that fund. And landlords who can show that they have experienced undue hardship, that they will go into foreclosure because of missed rental payments, then those landlords can get this money. And in exchange, the burden is basically shifted from tenants to landlords to the banks. One thing that people need to remember when we're talking about this rental debt is that nobody, not even landlords, expect a cent of this money to be paid. Landlords are not out there preparing, waiting for their first opportunity to go into court and to sue tenants for the tens of thousands of dollars. Landlords are not expecting tenants to enter into repayment plans. No serious person, no economist, no landlord, no tenant advocate really believes that this rental debt is ever going to get repaid. So that means what is the real significance of this rental debt? If it's not forgiven, the only real significance of this rental debt is that it gives every landlord in California a legal pretext to evict their tenants.
And let me just remind people that in California in 2019, they passed a Tenant Protection Act, which provides some type of rent control to just thousands of tenants, to properties that didn't have any type of protections. And as soon as that law passed in March of 2019, landlords started raising the rent and evicting people in order to be able to have a higher paying tenant in there before this law went into effect. And that's what landlords are doing right now. Okay, they're trying to kick everyone out in order to raise the rent, shuffle the chairs. I mean, we're playing musical chairs here, right? Everyone's going to be evicted. Everyone's going to have an eviction on the record. Everyone's credit's going to get ruined. And, I don't know. It's a travesty.
It seems like a lot of these decisions are based upon this debt. That's this past due debt. But I don't know, Stefano. I think you're suggesting that federal money come in, that Gavin Newsom don't give it to his friends and his consultants, and he uses it for actual people who need it. That's crazy. I mean, how is Nancy Pelosi going to buy her ice cream? Please. So just a little jab and a joke there. Does AB 15 have the same type of time period that AB 3088 has? In other words, they had from September to the end of January, 25% of the rent. It was 5 months. Does AB 15 have the same type of a timeline?
AB 15, when it was originally introduced, was meant to extend AB 3088's protections through the end of the current calendar year. So
to the end of 2021 to December?
The end of 2021. So if that had passed, then nobody would have been able to be evicted because of non-payment of rent if they were financially impacted by the pandemic until the end of this year. And if they paid 25% of what they owed by the end of 2021, then they wouldn't have been able to be evicted for that even after 2021. But at this point, AB 15, those conversations, we're really just waiting to see what Governor Newsom and his friends come up with on Monday.
Why isn't there a protest in front of his house right now? I mean, do we want at the very least, it seems like AB 15 will also give you guys time to figure out what to do. It would extend, okay, listen, we're in the middle of the crisis. President just got inaugurated the other day. He's hitting a 100-day mask mandate, which means the pandemic in their minds is still going on. They're going to still have lockdowns and still shut the economy down. Why wouldn't they at least do this so we give us some time to figure out what to do to help everybody out involved?
I mean, at the end of the day, we don't live in the same country. Different people of different means, of different circumstances have just had radically different experiences over the past year. And Governor Newsom, the folks who are opposing rental forgiveness, they live in a world, who do they know? Who are their friends? Who are the people they care about? They live in a world where the legislative solutions that they are proposing are by and large going to be fair for the people they know, for the world that they live in. That's always been the biggest obstacle to getting the real solutions that we need in California.
All right. Natalie, take out your crystal ball and tell me what happens on Monday.
On Monday, we get some bill that is even weaker than AB 3088, and that provides some type of defense for tenants. And then everyone's going to say, well, what a great job Governor Newsom did in providing an eviction moratorium for tenants. And more tenants are going to get confused, and they're not going to respond to their eviction notice. And they're going to get evicted, or they're going to move out, and the problem's just going to keep getting worse. At some point, we are going to start seeing, we've already been seeing just as you mentioned at the beginning of this, the homelessness crisis growing, because homelessness, one of the leading causes is eviction.
So what can folks do? Let's not end on a note of just complete.
That was my next question, Stefano. What do I do now that I haven't paid rent since March? Should I pay the 25 cents and 25%, give my 30-day notice, and move on to another place where the rent will be, a lot more affordable? Move out of LA because I can't afford it, or do I not even pay the 25%? Just give my 30-day notice and bounce. I mean, what do I do? Especially since I have a crappy landlord.
Well, what everyone needs to do, regardless of what comes out on Monday, the protections that have been passed, like we've said, can really help a lot of people. So two things need to happen. Everyone who's facing an eviction needs to make the effort as soon as possible to reach out to stayhousela.org and get legal representation, get legal advice. They need to support movements like the Right to Counsel movement in Los Angeles so that this important resource is accessible to as many people as possible. But at the same time, recognizing that there will never be enough tenant attorneys to really address the scale of the problem that we have on our hands on right now, something that everyone is going to need to do is become a little bit of a lawyer. Everyone's going to need to learn not only what these laws are, not only how to use them, but they're going to need to learn a little bit about how litigation works, how unlawful detainer proceedings in California run. Why do they need to know that? Not just to protect themselves in the event that they're unable to, get a lawyer, but because they're going to need to help their neighbors. If you have the ability to learn all of these laws, and the Eviction Defense Network, like a lot of other organizations, are holding trainings weekend after weekend, trying to arm Californians with this knowledge. And once you have it, knock on your neighbor's door, slip a card underneath their door, ask them if they're having trouble, ask them if they received an eviction notice, and offer to help.
Yeah, and I would say, don't move, because the rent it doesn't disappear. And who's to say that you're going to be able to afford that other unit as well, especially if you have to move and you have to find a job and you have to use that community. Don't move. Don't sign a repayment plan. Push for stronger laws.
Don't move.
Yeah, I would say don't move unless you have a place to go to that you can afford. You should still do it through an attorney, because when we have tenants who do want to move because they can't deal with the harassment from the landlord any longer, we often get them waiver of the back rent, so you can at least start fresh. But that's hard to do. Or if you're in a part of town or a city or part of the state that you don't have any access to these legal resources, demand that waiver of the back rent if you're going to move. Make that offer. I'll leave by the end of the month if you forgive the back rent. Okay, at least do that for yourself.
I have no doubt in my mind that if Californians prepared themselves, and if Californians got ready to fight, maybe in a way that we haven't had to fight before, because we're not talking about a protest. We're not talking about Twitter. We're not even talking about phone calls necessarily. But if we got mobilized in the ways we've described, I have no doubt at all that we'll be fine in the end.
So that's some great advice. I've been told before, don't give up the possession of your house rent wise until we get everything straight. But I'm like getting to a point where I'm getting nervous about the back rent because I see no forgiveness on it. And like, California, the rent is too damn high as is. So I also think what I'm getting from you guys too is that we have to wait till Monday to see exactly what the clear picture would be. And I just want to give you guys an open invitation to maybe come back sometime in the near future to tell us what to do. Right now, myself personally, I'm just going to pause, wait to see what happens on Monday, and then make a decision from there. But I also don't want to get too far in the hole of owing too much money of back rent because the rent here is high and the economy. I mean, we haven't been able to go to work and the unemployment is not as much as we would have made if we were working at our other jobs. So, I mean, it's just this scary kind of like mentality of what to do, where to go, how to do it, and when to do it.
If you're ready to fight and you arm yourself with some basic knowledge, you're not going to owe a cent of the back rent. The worst deal that the Eviction Defense Network has gotten for any of our clients since the beginning of this pandemic, the worst deal. No client has gotten a worse deal than waiver of back rent. All that back rent is canceled. Time to move, 30 days, 60 days, sometimes more. And in many cases, even some relocation assistance. We consistently get tenants anywhere from $5,000 to $50,000 to vacate a unit.
Which just shows you the value of where you live. You have a lot of power. Tenants have a lot of power if they're willing to, stand up for them together, but it is scary. And I recognize that. So, just reach out for some legal advice. And at the very least, if you're super scared and you just can't take that risk, negotiate a waiver of the back rent for yourself. Okay, people don't realize they can ask for these things. You really, really, really can. You have to stand up for yourself a little. And this empowerment, I think doing that is going to lead to a lot of empowerment for a lot of people.
Tell everybody where they can find you guys, and we'll also put the link down below. I can't thank you enough for coming here and on the show today and getting this information out. And you'll probably get a call from me in about an hour to ask about helping me get a waiver for that past rent and to see what I can do. Just tell us your names, tell us where we can find you. This has been an awesome show. I've had a lot of fun. Thank you so much. Go ahead, guys.
Sure. Name is Natalie Medina and work at the Eviction Defense Network. You can find us at edn.la.
And my name is Stefano Medina. And you could also find us, especially if you need help, at stayhousedla.org.
Guys, you are awesome. Thank you so much. Natalie with an H, Stefano. My Latino Italian paisan. I'd love to make you guys some vegan pasta one day. For everybody out there, thank you for watching. Get help. Go to their website. Know your rights. Stand up. Fight back. Call Sheriff Alex Villanueva. Call Governor Newsom. Let them know we want a serious bill that's going to help the little guy out once and for all. Convo out. We'll see you soon.